As I'm sure you guys already know, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, was arrested last Thursday inside the Ecuadorian embassy for his work publishing the Afghanistan and Iraq given to him by Chelsea Manning, who is back in jail for refusing to cooperate with the grand jury against Julian Assange. I did a video where I go over the details of how the Ecuadorian government revoked Julian Assange's asylum, illegally by the way, and the details of his arrest, possible extradition to the United States, and the precedent that this all sets. The charges being brought against Julian Assange by the Department of Justice are incredibly weak and flimsy, yet they are using this so-called evidence to take unprecedented steps like arresting someone, much less a journalist, inside of an embassy where he has asylum and extraditing him out of the country where he is to the United States to face prosecution over publishing classified documents that exposed war crimes. The implications of this arrest and possible extradition are wide-reaching, and the precedent is profound and puts every single journalist around the world in danger of being targeted by powerful governments for their work. So what's left of press freedoms and the First Amendment is at stake. So this story easily became one of the most, if not the most important story of the year. Which is why presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard made a point of condemning this action by the Trump Justice Department and setting the record straight for everyone in the political establishment and mainstream media who are distorting the facts of the story and not taking into account the precedent that arresting a journalist for publishing truthful information about a government that is in the best interest of the public to know for future journalists around the world. So this is a clip from an interview she did with Jake Tapper on the issue of Julian Assange. The clip's about 2 minutes long, it's very good, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. Congresswoman, aloha. Thanks for joining us.
Aloha, Jake. Good to see you.
So you served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. You're currently a major in the Army National Guard. Assange, along with Chelsea Manning, spread classified information that prosecutors at Manning's trial claimed could have brought harm to U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you agree with that? And what do you think about Assange's extradition and prosecution in the U.S.?
Look, over time, there hasn't been any proof that that has been brought to bore. And what we have seen is that so much of the information that's been released has informed the American people about actions that were taking place that they should be aware of. It provided transparency around issues both related to civil liberties as well as actions that our military was taking in the Middle East that they should not have been. So really, I think what's happening here is some form of retaliation coming from the government saying, hey, this is what happens when you release information that we don't want you to release. And I think that's why this is such a dangerous and slippery slope, not only for journalists, not only for those in the media, but also for every American, that our government can and has the power to kind of lay down the hammer to say, be careful, be quiet, and fall in line. Otherwise, we have the means to be able to come after you. So you don't think that he should have been extradited, and you don't support his prosecution in the U.S.? I think the charges about hacking, look, those can and should be worked out in the court of law. My point is that I think there's a bigger issue at play here. There's a reason why the Obama administration chose not to extradite and prosecute Assange, because they understood the danger. They understood the danger of the government coming in and controlling essentially what information is and is not being released. We can go back to the release of the Pentagon Papers as an example. We can look to how the American people have benefited from some of this information being released. So I think we've got to look at it within this larger context here and make sure that we understand what's at stake and actually the danger of what happens when we have people in government, whether it's this administration or a future administration, basically saying, hey, look, we can call WikiLeaks a foreign intelligence agency. We can designate an individual as a foreign asset or this or that, simply because they don't like the information that's being published or they don't like the things that you're saying.
I love that. This is quintessential Tulsi Gabbard. She's not mincing words. She's not going to repeat the establishment talking points about whoever they say is public enemy number one for the day just because everyone else is doing it. Tulsi Gabbard actually has principles, and she follows the facts of whatever issue is that she's talking about. And she's going to give you her opinion regardless if it's popular or not. And if you're going to try to browbeat her by bringing up Washington D.C. consensus as if that's going to make her change her mind or walk back what she said, she's going to double down and drop it on your head again because you didn't get it the first fucking time, like Jake Tapper here in this interview. So now let me get into the specifics. Of course, Tapper's first question is framed in an incredibly hacky way. He says Chelsea Manning and Assange spread classified information that prosecutors in Manning's trial said could be dangerous to U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you agree with that? And what do you think about Julian Assange arrest and prosecution? Look at the wording in the very beginning. Chelsea Manning and Assange spread classified information. So he's not even alleging that Julian Assange did any kind of crime right there. He's not even positing that Julian Assange hacked government databases. He just said Julian Assange spread classified information that prosecutors said could be dangerous, and I'll get to that point about the prosecutors in a minute. Jake, your network, and you specifically, publish classified government information on a regular basis. You quote, spread classified information. Are you suggesting that Trump, who has already said the leaks coming out of the White House and the Justice Department against him are dangerous, could then order his Justice Department to drag your ass out of your studio in handcuffs for publishing classified information? No, you wouldn't agree to that because, one, it affects you personally, and two, because it's not a fucking crime, it's called journalism. And now to the dumbass talking point that prosecutors say what WikiLeaks released in the Afghanistan-Iraq war logs put anyone in danger. It's been nearly 10 years since those leaks were published, and not a single shred of evidence that anyone's life was put in danger because of it. That was just the talking point the government was using at the time in order to demonize Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange in order to cover their ass. For 10 years, and no one could provide a shred of evidence that anybody was put in danger by these leaks. Why then is Jake Tapper, a so-called journalist, just repeating the talking points from the government that can easily be proven as false propaganda? Jake Tapper's doing this because he's not actually a journalist. He's a fucking tool and stenographer for the people in power, so whatever they say, he will repeat without question, without any critical thought. Tulsi Gabbard's response to this incredibly hacky, tooly question from Jake Tapper was phenomenal. She immediately slapped down the bullshit talking point that these leaks put anybody in danger by saying exactly what I said, that has yet to be proven. Then she did what no other politician or mainstream media figure is doing while discussing the story. Tulsi brought up the importance of the information that we learned from those leaks. How our government, who claimed to be over there fighting in the name of freedom and democracy, was committing brazen, heinous war crimes like slaughtering civilians and torturing people, and then covering it all up for years. And it's important that she did this because everyone else talking about this issue is either only repeating word for word what the Justice Department is saying in their indictment, that is bullshit, and I explained how that's bullshit in the video that I did, or they are just trying to conflate the 2016 DNC Podesta email leaks that many Democratic Party loyalists already hate Julian Assange for in order to gin up support for this unlawful arrest and prosecution. So again, this is Tulsi bucking mainstream orthodoxy and actually telling the truth without putting any type of bullshit political spin on it. Then she also brings up the important part about how this is not the Justice Department being thorough and following all leads in a potential crime against the US government. This is a form of retaliation for publishing information that embarrassed the national security state and the political establishment by exposing them as the war criminals that they are. So part of the precedent that's being set is, As long as the government can concoct some bullshit pretext, fig leaf to put over the prosecution of a journalist, they have free reign to go after anyone who publishes information that they don't like or that they find embarrassing in retaliation. And that is something that should scare the shit out of not only all journalists, but every single US citizen. So I'm extremely proud of Tulsi Gabbard's response of the arrest and prosecution of Julian Assange this weekend, because she's been on point and bringing up the relevant facts of the situation that everyone else seems to be ignoring on purpose. And this is why Tulsi Gabbard is gaining so much support among progressives and all kinds of voters across the country. You can never accuse her of kowtowing to the establishment and towing the party line or going along to get along. That's not what she does. You could rely on her to speak the truth no matter what the issue is: Medicare for all, the regime change wars, the corruption within the national security state, and the corruption in the Democratic Party. Tulsi Gabbard is not going to hold her head down just because an issue seems too controversial or that she fears that she might get some backlash for her opinion. She's unapologetic about her positions, which is why she has so much respect from people who follow politics. Which brings me to one Bernard Sanders. What the fuck are you doing? There have been a few times where we see Bernie Sanders politically calculating, and almost every time it's unnecessary and makes him look weak and unwilling to defend the correct position because it's politically inconvenient for him. This was really evident after Bernie Sanders lost his primary in 2016 and then was trying to cover up the corruption within the Democratic Party and acting as if there's nothing to see here. He did it when he was campaigning for Hillary Clinton. He even did it after the election when he was going around on that fucking goofy ass tour with Tom Perez and doing interviews with him and acting like the DNC didn't literally just rig the whole primary against him, and Tom Perez isn't a corporate tool put in place by the very same people who rigged the primary against him in order to shut out the Bernie Sanders wing of the party and ensure that the corporatists continue to remain in leadership and call all the shots. This is also the case when Bernie Sanders refuses to directly call out Democratic leadership by name like Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is literally the most ineffective minority leader in the Senate history ever. He never puts up a fight. He gets steamrolled by Republicans on literally every fucking issue. But Bernie will never say a negative word about Chuck Schumer and the rest of Democratic leadership. Bernie was wishy-washy on Venezuela, and he took a lot of heat for that and eventually came closer to the right position. But he was still unnecessarily equivocating and politically calculating. But right now, with this story about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, I'm telling you, Bernie, this is going to be a red line for a lot of people, because this isn't something that you could choose to be silent on, or you can choose to walk the fine line between what the establishment wants you to say and what's the actual correct position. The First Amendment and protections for journalists are on the line here. A man is being prosecuted. He will likely be tortured for publishing the truth about what we were doing with these illegal wars in the Middle East and our insane, unconstitutional torture network that we set up. This is also the same organization that published all the emails and documents in Wall Street speeches that proved you and your supporters weren't crazy, that we were correct when we were saying that the DNC had rigged the primary for Hillary Clinton from the beginning. So how many days has it been now? It's coming up on 4 days since Julian Assange had been arrested within the Ecuadorian embassy. And nobody on Bernie's team, or Bernie himself, has come out and said a goddamn word about it. Bernie, that's not right. That's a bullshit move. That's a bitch move by you, Bernie Sanders. So I don't know how much longer you can go around pretending like this shit isn't happening or like it isn't a major issue. But let me tell you this. When you do finally address it, you better be direct and straight to the point. No political calculations, no fucking smooth talking, none of that bullshit. Because we know you like to do that on certain issues to avoid being called a radical or smeared in any way by the establishment for being on the right side of an issue. You need to come out and unequivocally condemn this move by the Trump administration, by the UK government, and the Ecuadorian government. And you need to stand up for WikiLeaks and the freedom of the press in the United States and journalists around the world, because this is a dangerous precedent. And I'm not saying 100% that this will make me not vote for Bernie Sanders, but I guarantee it's making me question his integrity if he's not willing to stand up on such an important issue just because he thinks it might not be politically convenient for him.